The snow fell like a shroud, and I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that it wasn't just snow. The static started subtly, a high-pitched whine beneath the drone of the snowplows on Maple Street. It wasn't the radio. I'd fiddled with the dial for an hour, cycling through every station, every frequency. It was in the air. I was 16, holed up in the farmhouse with my dad, a man built of silence and stubbornness, and my younger sister, Sarah. Christmas Eve, 1987. The kind of winter that presses against the windows like a hungry beast. The kind that makes you question the sanity of anyone who dares to venture outside. The farmhouse, Blackwood Farm, had always been a repository of unsettling quiet. My grandfather built it, back when the land was still wild, before the whispers started. Whispers about the old logging trails, about the men who disappeared in the woods, about the way the shadows seemed to lengthen unnaturally after dusk. Dad always dismissed them as folklore, the ramblings of old-timers. But the static felt different. It felt old. I started noticing things. The way the streetlight above the mailbox flickered, not with a power surge, but with a deliberate, rhythmic pulse. The way the dogs Buster, a scruffy mutt, and Shadow, a sleek black German shepherd, would freeze mid-stride, their ears rotating, listening to something I couldn't hear. Sarah, always a sensitive child, started drawing pictures, endless rows of black, geometric shapes, obsessively detailed, depicting nothing, just angles and lines, arranged with a terrifying precision. "It's just the snow, Ben," Dad would say, his voice rough with exhaustion. He'd been working 18-hour shifts at the mill, trying to keep the farm afloat. He'd started drinking more, too. The silence between us thickened, laced with a fear I couldn't articulate, couldn't even fully acknowledge. The static intensified around the old radio in the parlor. It wasn't a signal, it was a presence. I'd found it in the attic, a relic from my great-grandfather, a hefty mahogany unit with dials that seemed to melt under your touch. It hadn't worked in decades, but the static had emanated from it. I spent hours, days, trying to fix it, driven by a compulsion I couldn't understand. I disassembled it, cleaned the tubes, replaced the capacitors, all to no avail. The static remained, a constant, insistent drone. One evening I was meticulously cleaning the radio's chassis, tracing the intricate wiring with a small screwdriver, when I heard it, a voice. Not a broadcast, not a human voice. It was layered, distorted, almost like a recording played backward, then reversed again. It whispered a single word. "Remember." I froze. The room seemed to shrink, the walls closing in. The smell of pine and dust intensified, overlaid with something metallic, something rotten. I looked up, but the parlor was empty. Just the snow falling, relentless, silent. That's when I saw it. The reflection in the polished wood of the radio's casing. Not my reflection. A man. Tall, gaunt, with eyes that burned with an unnerving intensity. He wasn't in the radio. He was of it. He wasn't smiling, but I felt a pressure in my chest, a suffocating sense of recognition. Like I'd known him my entire life, and a part of me desperately wanted to. Dad found me there, kneeling before the radio, babbling about the man in the wood. He didn't question me. He just looked at me with a sadness so profound it physically ached. He picked me up, carried me back to the bedroom, and administered a sleeping pill. I woke up the next morning with a dull headache and a persistent feeling that I'd forgotten something vital. The static was louder. The man in the reflection was clearer. I began to track him, not with any conscious effort, but with an instinctive pull, a compulsion I couldn't resist. I started spending my days in the woods behind the farm, following the faintest traces of his presence, disturbed snow, broken branches, the unnerving feeling of being watched. I found a small wooden box buried beneath a gnarled oak tree. Inside, a single, perfectly preserved raven's feather. It wasn't just a feather, it was a key. The collector started appearing in my peripheral vision, fleeting glimpses of a dark, almost intangible figure, always just out of focus, always observing. I caught myself staring at empty spaces, convinced I'd seen him, but when I turned, there was nothing. Sarah's drawings intensified. The geometric shapes became more complex, more unsettling. She started speaking in fragmented sentences, repeating phrases she hadn't learned, snippets of conversations from decades past, from a life she couldn't possibly know. "Don't look at the snow," she'd whisper, her eyes wide with a terror that mirrored my own. "It remembers." I realized then that the static wasn't just in the radio. It was in the snow. It was in the farmhouse. It was in me. One evening, I went out to the porch, drawn by the insistent whine of the static. The snow was falling heavily now, obscuring everything. And there he was, the man from the radio, standing motionless in the darkness, watching. He raised a hand, and I saw something in his palm, a photograph. An old photograph of my grandfather, standing in front of the farmhouse, smiling. But his smile wasn't genuine. It was a grotesque, unsettling parody of happiness. As I stared at the photograph, a memory surfaced, a memory I hadn't realized I possessed. A memory of my grandfather, a memory of a terrible accident, a logging accident, a lost man swallowed by the woods. A memory of the static, louder than ever, filling the air. The collector was closer now, his presence suffocating. I understood. The farmhouse wasn't just a repository of silence. It was a collector of memories, of trauma. The static was the echo of those memories, amplified and distorted by the abyss. The man in the radio was a fragment of that trauma, a manifestation of the darkness that had always resided within the farm. I tried to run, but it was too late. The snow seemed to rise up, swirling around me, blinding me. The static intensified, consuming everything. I looked back, and he was still there, smiling. The last thing I heard was Sarah's voice, a chilling echo of my own, whispering, "Remember." I don't know how long I was lost in that white expanse. I don't know how long I was trapped in that horrifying loop. I woke up on the porch, the snow still falling, the static still humming, the collector still watching. He wasn't gone. He was simply waiting. I haven't seen Sarah since. I tried to find her, but she's gone, just like the others. The farmhouse is gone too, or at least it's not the farmhouse I remember. It's different. The rooms shift, the walls rearrange themselves, the architecture seems to breathe. It's as if the house itself is trying to erase my existence. I'm writing this now, in a notebook I found hidden in the attic, hoping that someone someday will find it and understand. But I don't believe that anyone will, because the static is always there, a constant, insistent drone. And I know, with a certainty that chills me to the bone, that it's not just snow, it's waiting.